Imagine spending 10 years of your life building rockets for your country, and then one morning you wake up and you simply quit. Well, that's not dramatic movie scene. That's what's been really happening right now inside India's ISRO, and that's been happening at NASA as well for years. Now, the scientists and engineers who once dreamed of working for a government space agencies, they are basically leaving in numbers that are clearly hard to ignore. And the reason why? That will completely change how you think about the future of space. Now, let's first understand India's space story, which has always been one of doing more with less. Now, ISRO sent a mission to Mars on a budget smaller than the Hollywood movie Gravity. They landed on the moon's south pole when no one else could. And for decades, India's brightest engineers were proud to be a part of that journey, even if the pay wasn't that great. But then in the year 2020, India opened its space sectors to the private companies, and here is when everything changes. Suddenly, startups like Skyroot Aerospace, Pixel, they began hiring in India, and India went from a handful of government space jobs to 400 plus registered space startups attracting nearly $500 million in investment, which also includes $150 million in 2025 alone. Now, these companies offered things ISRO simply could not match, which is salaries which are 2 to 3 times higher, stock options and equity, leadership roles within years, not decades, and the freedom to clearly move fast from India to hardware at the startup speed. Now, so what has really happened? Nearly 100 scientists walked out of ISRO in just a few months. And here is the kicker, that the government's response wasn't to raise salaries or fix the system. They issued a directive saying resignations from critical mission scientists would not be accepted as a matter of routine. That's also right because they clearly the government they try to administratively stop people from leaving. Now the experts are clearly warning that this move could make ISRO even less attractive to the next generation of engineers. But why is that so? Let me tell you in the next section. So now if this sounds familiar, it's because NASA has been living this story for over a decade now. When SpaceX and Blue Origin exploded onto the scene, they didn't just disrupt the launch industry, they clearly raided the talent pool. Now the numbers, they tell a different story clearly. A starting aerospace engineer at NASA earns around $54,000 a year. Now, the same role at SpaceX between $95,000 and $1,15,000 plus the equity. SpaceX was listing over 1,100 job openings at one point. Blue Origin had 1,500 plus, and their recruiters they don't go to career fairs. They just straight go to campus, robotics clubs, and rocket societies and find the hungry ones. But here is where NASA's story really gets interesting because unlike ISRO right now, NASA actually adapted. Now, a two-way revolving door was formed. Engineers would leave NASA for SpaceX or any other private firm, burn out from the insane pace and pressure, and then they would come back. NASA clearly leaned into what it could offer, which was stability, federal benefits, purpose driven missions, and work life balance. Now, NASA's own deputy director of talent literally has mentioned that it is more and more common that we have people moving back and forth between NASA and SpaceX. Now, that is not a crisis, that's a mature ecosystem. But why is it not a crisis and a mature ecosystem? Let us understand more about how has US been tackling it. It basically means that both ISRO and NASA are facing the same fundamental truth that when you train the world's best minds, you also train their ambition. And ambition doesn't wait for government pay cycles or approval committees clearly. Now, the real question isn't how do we stop people from leaving? It is how do we build an ecosystem where the best talent wants to stay or keeps coming back to the government. Now, ISRO senior officials themselves are saying it out aloud that let's look at NASA's model, how they are managing everything. Adopt project-based employment, restructure, compensation, stop treating private companies as competition and start treating them as partners clearly, not literal partners, but something some companies we can learn from. And here is the truth. The 21st century space race isn't just between nations, it's between governments and their own private sectors for the brightest minds on the planet. Even if not the brightest mind, then also it's a race between them.